Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2. We are in action with the Skaven this time, as you can see from this absolutely just brutal looking Bonebreaker here. We are facing up against the High Elves, so let's go ahead and get started straight to the army compositions. Of course, the Bonebreaker, as you guys can see, is the Lord. We've got a Warlord up on top here. Pretty good stats overall for the Bonebreaker. He's got heavy armor piercing, pretty good speed as well at 60. He does have the Verminous Valor, which is a nice splash, splash attack that if he's surrounded by infantry, can use it to potentially get away very quickly. He's also got Rally and Scurry Away, of course, the Skaven army-wide ability, which is when their leadership drops low, they'll run away. However, when they're let's have a look here. I'm trying to remember. It's actually with the regular hit units. Oh yes, disabled if leadership is high. So basically, when their leadership gets low, they'll gain speed, so they can run away faster. When their health is above 50%, they gain +6 leadership and +5 melee defense, but they lose a bit of speed as well. I believe he just has Scurry Away. He doesn't actually have strength in numbers, so that only looks like it applies to the infantry units. But beyond that, he also causes fear, as you can probably imagine. For the infantry here, we've got a mix of Death Runners and Plague Monks. So let's talk a bit about both these guys. Death Runners are a very good damage dealer type unit. I say damage dealer, they're dual wielding. They've got pretty decent melee stats for Skaven. They've also got really good leadership for Skaven. Plague Monks are similar. Both of them have very, very low armor, but they have different purposes, and they actually complement each other very, very well. So the Death Runners have armor-piercing weapon strength. They also have this ability called Weeping Blade, which is absolutely just amazing. This bound ability on their melee attacks. So they sunder armor. However, rather than the typical sunder armor that we're used to from, say, the Greenskins, where it's -30 armor, this is, rather than being a flat value, it's -50% armor, which means it scales very, very well to high armor elite units, which the High Elves have quite a few of, especially their infantry. So it makes sense to bring these guys. Can potentially get them down to very, very low armor, and then you combine them with the Plague Monks, who are another kind of damage dealer type infantry. They have anti-infantry and pretty decent overall weapon strength, so you use them in combination with each other, and you sunder the armor, and then the Plague Monks can get a lot more work done for their cost, and it's pretty cost effective. Both these guys also have physical resistance as well, 30% on the Death Runners, and it looks like 15% on the Plague Monks. So, that lack of armor is definitely a problem. You want to keep them away from skirmishers, but potentially using them together, they're both relatively cheap, and you can get a really nice front line, using them in combination. I'm backing them up with some Storm Vermin. These guys are the elite Skaven infantry, decent leadership. Of course, they've got halberds, so they've got armor-piercing, anti-large weapon strength. Decent melee defense as well, just pretty good unit overall. 70 armor on these guys, or excuse me, 90 armor on the Storm Vermin, so that's really good actually for Skaven. We've also got on each flank a unit of Rat Ogres. So these are the one kind of high mass unit that the Skaven have. They lack any kind of cavalry. Rat Ogres are really the natural counter there. They've got armor-piercing weapon strength. They're pretty fast at 60. They've got decent leadership, frenzy, of course, the other pertinent abilities. Very good units overall, and definitely essential to help pin down high mass units. Otherwise, like chariots and cavalry will do a lot of damage to Skaven. We've also got one Warp Lightning cannon here to also deal with large threats. It's very much a similar role to the Empire cannon, or the Dawi cannon. Long range, anti-large weapon strength with armor piercing, very accurate as well, so good stuff there. It is worth noting that these things do magical damage as well, so if something has a physical resistance, they will bypass that. We've also got Skaven Slave Spears on each flank for some nice cheap anti-large. Skaven Slaves, definitely pretty good for their cost. They're super cheap, and if you give them spears, they have a minuscule, +6 anti-large bonus, which isn't a lot, but it helps. Anything helps, especially when they're that cheap. So a mirror on this side, we've got Rat Ogres and the Skaven Slave Spears, and yeah, that's pretty much it for my build. For the magic, I've got a Plague Priest. He's got a couple abilities here. Just the two summons, Vermintide and Pestilent Birth. One of them summons Clan Rats, the other summons Plague Monks, both very useful abilities. This, especially with these high numbers of the Skaven, being able to swarm, pin down archers and so on, very useful. Let's go ahead and kick things into slow motion while we take a look at the High Elf build here. Sorry this has taken a while, guys, but this game is fairly new, and I just want to talk through some things, maybe give you guys a few pointers, kind of have some discussion on some of these different units and their uses. So my opponents brought the Princess, which is an interesting choice. I haven't used her a whole lot, so I can't comment too much on her ability. She is the one with the bow, of course. So let's go ahead and take a look. Of course, she's on the Star Dragon, which is now menacingly looking at the camera. That's a little bit unsettling, but he's got the Star Dragon Breath. Also got the Talisman of R.O.U.S. Okay, so looks like that's a melee augment in case she does get into melee. And the Volley of High Arrows. Let's see. It looks like maybe like a Arrows of Kurnus type ability. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. For the rest of his build, he's got archers with some Lothern Seaguard, which are an interesting unit. I think these guys are maybe a little bit overpriced, just because they don't have armor-piercing missiles, and for their cost, I think they're about 650 if I remember correctly, which is in the same realm as Empire handgunners, other like armor-piercing types of missiles. They of course don't have armor-piercing. They do have a spear and decent melee stats, so they're not going to die instantly to cavalry charge. And I'd imagine these guys are going to be very useful in certain matchups, like the greenskins, for example. They're almost immune to goblin wolf riders, and of course they'll do a lot of damage to the low armor greenskins. Against the Skaven, skirmishers are generally a pretty good idea. The issue is you're going to have a hard time protecting them. Skaven do have low armor, but they also have a lot of numbers, so it's going to be tough to try and protect a back line. Even with only a few archers like this, it's going to be a tough time for this elf player to protect everything. To that effect, he's got White Lions of Trace mixed with Spearmen, which are the two cheapest high elf infantry, and pretty much what you're going to see in almost any high elf build. The Spearmen are 500, which is a bit much for what they are, to be totally honest. I mean, they do have great melee defense, but only 40 armor and really kind of pitiful weapon strength. White Lions of Trace are a pretty good unit for their cost. They have pretty good combat stats overall, decent weapon strength. I'd say they're probably about on par with Chaos Warriors with great weapons. But they are very expensive, and there's really nothing in between these two. I mean, and there's nothing below Spearmen either. So the High Elves really suffer, and I think this is one of what makes them, one of the weakest, if not the weakest faction in this game. I mean, they're still very good, don't get me wrong, but they really lack cost-effective infantry. I mean, all their infantry is very expensive. It's a similar problem to what Chaos had in Patch 1, although it's not nearly as bad with these guys. The White Lions are cost-effective, but the fact that there's nothing in between these two is a little bit tough. There's nothing in that 600 to 700 range, which is where a lot of the really cost-effective infantry in the game are. White Lions are definitely cost-effective. It's just tough that you can't bring a wider army, especially against a foe like Skaven, who's going to potentially bring a lot of numbers against you. But anyway, just a few thoughts of mine. He's also got a Lore Master of R.O.U.S, which is a very good pick. He's got some nice spells, Spirit Leech and Healing, two very competitive spells. He's a great character in himself. Anti-infantry, armor piercing, great combat stats, 90 armor. A really, really nice character to bring. Definitely a staple of any high elf competitive build. And yeah, that's pretty much it. He does have some cavalry as well as one unit of Swordmasters of R.O.U.S. These guys are very expensive, but they are very good units. I really am curious to test them up against some of the other elite infantry from Game 1, like Black Orcs and, Bestigor Herd. Obviously, they beat Great Swords. I'm curious to know how they do against Black Orcs and maybe like Chosen with great weapons, some of the other, units in that class, Hammerers and so on. But they're a very good unit. They also have this martial prowess. For some reason I was thinking, oh no, it's over here, missile block chance. I thought they had a missile resistance. They actually have a missile block chance. Even though they don't have shields, they can bat arrows out of the sky, I guess, and bullets, which is interesting. Good stuff. And then yeah, over here in the back he's got this one unit of Silver Helms, which these guys are, I was hoping they would be really a nice cost-effective cavalry, but they're just not really there. They've only got 90 armor, which is, I mean, I say only. 90 armor is great, but it's not, Reichsguard level 110. And, I guess comparable to Knights of the Realm. They're combat stats are decent, but they don't really have great armor piercing. Charge bonus of 58 is good, but they just don't really have the staying power, and it's weird. I feel like they don't have it as impactful of a charge as a lot of the, I guess human cavalry from Game 1, Knights of the Realm, Reiksguard, and so on. It just feels like the Silver Helms and even the Dragon Princes just don't have as impactful of a charge. I don't know if that's a change they've made to this game or if it's just the High Elf cavalry specifically, but, just a few more thoughts. Anyway, we've been trying to get some work done with Warp Lightning Cannon on the Dragon, but my opponent wisely flying into the forest here. Can't really get to him effectively there, so we're going to change targets, and actually missed that, but... Skaven gonna be Skaven, and he'll probably say this was an accident, but we know it wasn't an accident. Come on, let's be real, they're Skaven. So a bit of friendly fire going down there, but no big deal. We are getting the mainline engagement underway here, the Death Runners combining with the Plague Monks here, and let's go ahead and take a look at the stats of these White Lions here. You can see the White Lions down to 45 armor, so they're really not going to be trading cost effectively in this engagement. Just engaging across the line here. The Silver Helms did come in and get a great charge on these Death Runners, but they're going to need to be able to get out of here immediately. You can see they're under the effects of the Weeping Blade. They're down to 45 armor, so you can see what I was saying about it scaling very, very well. As the Swordmasters come in here as well, they're going to go down to 45 armor, and it's just not cost effective for the High Elf units to take that much damage, from these lower cost units. And the Swordmaster as well, in a bit of a rough situation, kind of surrounded by Storm Vermin here. You can see the dragons breathing fire down into the cannon. He honestly just needs to come down into melee, although he does have the ranged variant of Lord. If he brought them down into melee, I had my Bonebreakers on station, but I'm now moving them off around the flanks to get on these skirmishers, because they're doing a lot of damage. Meaning that I don't really have a lot to protect this cannon here. Granted, I could bring in the Warlord on the Bonebreaker if he charged down in, but he could potentially take 1 to 2 unit models offline and terrify away the crew. Meanwhile, over here on this flank, the Silver Helms getting mucked up in the forest here against Rat Ogres and the Skaven Slaves with spears. Their armor's also being sundered, so the Skaven Slaves will trade much more cost effectively here, of course, with the Death Runners. And over here on this flank, Spearmen just holding out. In the center, this White Lion is going to get broken here as it's matched up on by Storm Vermin and Death Runners. Just totally outclassed there. In the center, he's winning somewhat, but we're able to do a lot of damage considering the cost of our units comparatively to his. You can see this Spearman is pretty much gone. The White Lions as well, having taken quite a bit of damage. Swordmasters haven't been taking too much damage yet, but you can see now the Bonebreaker going to get in on this Swordmaster, and although he is an excellent character with great combat stats, he is not going to have a fun time up against a Rat Ogre Bonebreaker here with the heavy armor piercing and just amazing not amazing combat stats, but the high mass, high weapon strength is really going to be a bad time for this Lore Master of Hoeth. So he's going to take a ton of damage here. You can see him actually getting knocked over there and routed off. So that's tough. No more magic for them. You can see I'm just continually summoning in Plague Monks and Clan Rats. We broke that unit of White Lions. We did get through onto these archers as well with those Rat Ogres. Silver Helms, however, rallied and saw them off. This other unit of Rat Ogres, though, is into this unit of archers, able to do quite a bit of shock damage on the charge. The princess is finally going to come down off the dragon. We've been continuously targeting her when able to with the Warp Lightning Cannon, and able to do about 20% of her HP damage over the course of the fight, which isn't great, but, anything we can do to this huge monster is going to be good. Storm Vermin is probably the one unit it does not want to be tangled up with here, so he is going to wisely pull away there. Storm Vermin are taking a lot of damage from these missiles, however, the Lothern Seaguard turning away, trying to fire in on this flank, get some work done, but you can see this center pocket just completely wrapped up. Those Swordmasters just got destroyed, only getting 57 kills, which, it is a lot, but against Skaven you would hope to see a lot more. Plague Monks and Death Runners just combining to do a lot of nice work here. The backline is completely collapsed at this point. You can see the balance of power is pretty heavily in my favor now. My High Elves are pretty much running for the hills. The Princess is trying to do what she can, but just surrounded by Death Runners and Storm Vermin and all sorts of nastiness. Not really having a fun time here. Yeah, the archers too, just continually peppering down, but because there's just so many numbers here, they weren't able to fire in, effectively on that center engagement. If he had, you can see a lot of my units are fairly low. He potentially could have won that, but yeah, just a tough battle for the High Elves, and they're a good army for sure. But they struggle against a lot of the other armies in this game. I'd imagine they'll be very good against a lot of the Game 1 factions. Well, of course, we'll have to wait and see. So we'll watch these Plague Monks as they charge into these Lothern Sea Guard here. Plague Monks are a really nice unit in that damage dealer class. I'd say they're probably about on par with Battle Pilgrims. I'd be curious to test those guys one-on-one when we're able to, but I'd probably put them in about that category. They're very good units, and especially when you combine them with the Death Runners, they can be really cost-effective. Really cost-effective, so just trying to wrap things up here. This princess is routing off this unit of Death Runners here, but really this is a lost cause at this point. This unit of Lothern Sea Guard is getting absolutely crumbled by Plague Monks, just Plague Monks upon Plague Monks, and definitely probably smells horrible too, so they're going to rout off, and just bring in the rest of this kind of goon squad here with the Storm Vermin and the Rat Ogres and the big old Bonebreaker. Man, so cool, just looks great. The artists really did a good job with the Game 2 units. They all look amazing. That fire, though, actually took down one Rat Ogre. Impressive. Well played to my opponent. Hope you guys enjoyed watching that. I know I sure enjoyed playing it. Let's go ahead and take a look at the army breakdown. Yeah, you can see Plague Monks, 101 kills and 132, and that is against High Elves, who have relatively low numbers and relatively elite units overall. So that's great numbers for a Skaven unit. The Death Runners as well, 74, 86, and 80. Really nice on these guys. The Rat Ogres, didn't get a ton of kills, but they were able to really pressure that back line and do some damage to the Silver Helms, who themselves got 33 kills. Only 5 kills on the Warp Lightning Cannon. Didn't do what I wanted it to, but I wasn't really paying attention to the map when I selected this, and I'm also a little bit new to a lot of the maps, so I don't know if I would have recognized it if I, had even looked at it. I don't know if I would have recognized that this wasn't a great map for this, but it ended up doing okay. The Storm Vermin as well kind of got shot up a little bit, but they did do some good work as well. And the Warlord coming through with hardly any damage, taking out that Swordmaster of Hoeth was very nice. And yeah, my opponent getting 108 kills on this princess, but he needed to do more almost. If he had brought that down in the mainline engagement and gotten a nice terror route, he could have potentially won there. But it's hard to say. Yeah, with the High Elves against the Skaven, the chariots, the Tyrannok chariots, and the other ones, I forget the name, they can be potentially pretty good here. Rat Ogres are a counter to them, but beyond that, Skaven don't really have a lot of tools to stop chariots. So we'll take a look at a replay about that later on. But for now, that is all. So hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you like this kind of content, like and subscribe. I'm keeping it coming with more every day, so stay tuned for more, and we'll see you next time.